Today is July 7th, 2025. The time is currently 8:32 p.m. 87. Time passed. Change and decay began to show like wear and tear on the upholstery of chairs. Indolent minds and aimless wasted spirits sat fettered by frustration, stupidly reclining in Goldondic comfort which had known better days, by which owning to the laws of stress was only a memory now. Boredom, the borderline between satiety and apathy, had long ago been reached and crossed. And now our souls turned back for solace to the sufferings which had marked our time, and novel words, the latest dance craze, followed. Close on, clo- Close on each other, merely to sink, forgotten, in rapid streams of time, which swirled in sluggish currents towards the shores of death. The lazy brain became a burden to itself, and the spirits on the bookshelves never read were seen to turn their backs on glutted minds which could no longer be disturbed by thought. Strange signs were visible in space, but since they could not be comprehended in the daily program were soon forgotten. We came, for instance, fairly close one day to a strange sun, a half-extinguished neighbor of the one who shone so gloriously on Doris, and Isabel came in to me and said, "Dear friend, what do you think? Shall we, or not?" I replied that although the time seemed ripe, space was, after all, a question mark. It might be wiser, therefore, for some time yet, to keep the moth away from the bright flame which offered itself here as our cremator. And Isabel left things at that, though her eyes blazed phosphorus with wrath, a wrath which at that time was pure and holy, and so behind the backs of our dull crowd she protected our space Golconda Aniara. 88. But our clear-eyed spirit Isagel broke down. A sickly demon came into her eyes. Her widening pupils sought the source of the soul, and she heard cries and echoes from remote distances. She said that she had heard a voice which called her by a name she did not know, and that afterwards the same call had often sounded in the halls of Mima. It came from Mima's grave, and so one night when everyone else was asleep she obeyed the voice, crept to the graveside, and found sitting there a messenger from the mansions of eternity. I pretended to believe her, though I knew that Isagel, my friend, of all things we'd met in space, had been pierced by a splinter when we collided with the Leonide. Thus it was not the wilds of space alone, nor the spiritual void through which we travel here, but also many a carefully guarded personal secret, which deeply, cruelly wears down our courage. She suggested once, sitting thoughtfully, that she identified herself with Death, who, keeping watch in Aniara's night, measured the meager lifespans of the passengers. I thought at first this was a joke, such as imagined spleen, in deserts where there was no hope of rescue. But when I realized her trend of thought, I tried to turn her soul to different pursuits. The ruler of pure thought, our spirit's succor, thus prepared herself for the fields of glory the deserts of space had no means of comprehending, but I understood in my heart how this had happened. Invisible to us, she glided quietly into the region of the laws of numbers, where endless, unexplored reserves await us, when the powers of chance decide the hour has come. 89. When one we love has passed beyond death's door, space seems more cruel and sombre than before. Our burden becomes heavier, we are crushed, our soul will never again be released from the dead grasp of evil space. And so from the picture archives I take out all that I put aside from Mima's days, and Mima's hall turns into a crowded grotto, where fragments from the Mima's visions paint in colors of the afterglow of Frez, a sunset in the realm of Aniara. 90. At one time, out of favor with Giffone, I was hunted At one time out of favor with Trifone, I was hunted by his men and then condemned for an indefinite time to the ship's deepest dungeon, in which only gangsters were usually confined. And yet I thought the day will surely come when Trifone, though he'll not do it gladly, must liberate his expert on the Gupta, and when that day comes I'll be released. Almost as if in answer to my thoughts, a violent tremor passed through the Golconda. It was as if my Isagel had called me from the hidden kingdom where she dwells, and that same night, after the watch had ended, Isagel came to me in a dream of supernatural light which filled my heart with warmth beyond description. And being now an expert in the reading of signs, and able to deduce what power they have to generate new thoughts resembling the Mima's formulas, I saw now, filled with reverence, who she was, my Isagel, and why she still lingered so faithfully, harking to my questions, so that when need be she could answer me. And it dawned on me then that Isagel, the fair and glorious bride of my own mind, in this space world beyond the god of life, was Mima's very self, was Mima's very soul. In Aniara's Gopta vault, equipped with aerials, tremor of Isagel-like sensitivity caused much disturbance, even to Chiffone. So, against his will, but at his orders, I was brought back to freedom. In ordinary language, an inheritance from Doris, the disturbance I have mentioned revealed that the balance of our ship was now in danger, so, released from prison to locate the fault, I was restored again to Mima's hall. 91. We plummeted deep into the abyss. It sounds like a tall story written in desperate fear in every face, but there was general agreement on this. One could not complain of lack of mass suggestion. A puzzling failure in the gravitation center gave us this sense of falling, the illusion that no matter what we did we'd keep on falling in one direction, downward through a void, no longer rounded or vaulted, but like a well into which we dived headlong. My Gopta knowledge stood me in good stead, and seldom have I seen people happier than when helped by the Gopta calculus. Within a few hours I could lift the load of fear and sense of endless falling from their hearts. That was a red-letter day among celestial stars. Isagel, my beloved, where are you? Our fame is now assured. The Gopta calculus has scored a triumph. 92. All the fire that used to burn bright within us derived its light, its soul, from Mima's waves. Never again have we found those scenes which, grouped round Mima, we saw then. Beliefs long preyed upon by time, and impoverished more and more by our own emptiness, are difficult to hold in honor. Continuously uttering their lamentations, the exorcisers stood in Mima's hall, swollen mouths sucking at the goddess's blood. Even human sacrifice was reintroduced, though custom had frayed its sanctity with its constant stream of broken oaths. Such sacrifices, however, soon lost their interest for us, since we could find no redemption in sacrificial blood, indifferently offered, which, thus, meaninglessly flowed away. People who had experienced the scale of the phototurb and known Shinambra's day of holocaust in Gond found such offerings here ironically lukewarm, imagined against the red-hot backcloth of Shinambra. Even the memory of Mima's days had a significance, and those who knelt in attitudes of prayer, following rites enacted only with a pretense of feeling, were ashamed. Soon, too, the soulless disciples of the cult felt the flow of sacrificial blood grow cold, sensing their own vacuity besides the remains of truth-loving Mima. Thus, in due course, even they refused to assist in the ceremonies commanded by Chiffone. What a blow for that autocratic, hardened circus trainer. 93. Now everyone refusing sacrifice was humbled, for Chiffone inflicted hideous punishment. Torn between 4 deadly magnets, every rebel died in nameless agony. From that day on, no one entered the hall where Mima slept, and where the cult had faded, for hope had little chance there against despair, and even Chiffone became apprehensive. In illuminated letters on his screen he published new laws to lessen the strain of our last days. He dressed up gangsters to look like good Samaritans, and ordered them to mitigate the effects of penalties. And Trifone himself, now strangely benevolent, was seen quietly mixing healing ointments, and, as though suddenly transformed by magic, helping the sick and caressing the frozen. 94. Death Certificate. An evil-minded, baleful self-torturer, a wallower in egoistic sorrows, presider for a time in Mima's hall. At Egol he had murdered a whole people, now he was the ruler of those who had come from Doris's valleys. After he had practically devoured himself, leaving only fragments which could not gobble themselves up, he vanished. The very floor on which he used to stand rejoiced. He was called Trifone from Zazakal. 95. Now I no longer in this gorge set up a balance between fact and illusion. No one came now, indeed, to seek for illusions. The facts were all too obvious at last, as though from inside an enormous coffin of crystal all of us, or nearly all, saw whither we were going, or everywhere there was a window facing horrors and words of hope could deceive us no longer, and only stars a million miles away peered into that coffin as it glided on, bearing inside it the proud race of Doris, and as in a morning bell of glass, the clapper of each soul toiled in ecstatic fear against reverberating transparent walls. We crowded close there in Mima's hall. I was squeezed in among the rest. Fear extinguished every memory of Doris. I shared with them the agony of that moment. 96. The leaders could no longer hide from us now, the near approach of extermination. Even so, they still tried hard to hide the facts and formulas from our fifth tensor calculus. They refused me admission to the calculus and forbade my entry to the prognosis rooms, but those who have once learnt to tell the time can always thereafter foresee the eventide. I went to Mima's grave and fell prostrate, bowed deep in prayer to which God who can tell. I begged in the cold hall in desperation for a miracle to be wrought with inanimate matter. And then, although there was no outward sign, I heard how inanimate things bore witness to my great mystery, which was deepened by light from Mima's guttering graveside candles. 97. All thought collapsed and imagination died at the beginning of the 24th year, crushed by the unending incomprehensibility of heaven's reaches stretching to infinity. All our dreams gave up and finally confessed to their humble rank in Gazlanut. Total darkness filled many souls. Lost to reality, they moved about in the halls, vainly questioning each other about the way home and far familiar things, crowding round the lamps as moths do in autumn in the distant plains of Doris. 98. A sorcerer in Mima's hall. I hail all conquerors of bitter cold. I beg the seraphim for their support. I ask that visions may be vouchsafed. I pray that Isagel in this chill hall may rise unscathed from the shell of her urn. Arise, my Isagel, from the ashes of death. Arise, O Isagel, and give me strength. 99. I moved about the halls at a late hour. I shivered that night in Mima's hall. The memory of Doris, now freezing cold and foreign to all softness, tore my soul. Corrosion penetrated even deeper into every cranny our dreams tried to preserve, and dust fell like the sand of time itself on tables and on floors in aniara. So, in the 24th year, the Golconda travelled with unchecked speed towards the Lyra, and now the distant star of Doris mingled with countless others in a dust storm of stars, which seemed to gather in flocks for company, but which in actual fact quivered and hung so sparsely scattered in the eternal cold that each star was a martyr of the void. Quieter, more and more desolate Aniara became, a proud Golconda once, now a sarcophagus, which, bereft of her own strength, could only fall along the loxodrome which she retained in falling. The pilot's cabin had long been empty, and former navigators who had worked in the ingenious nose-cone had laid had lain for years now in the quiet place where Daisy Duty slept, entombed as befits the Queen of Yerg in the centre of her court. The halls themselves were hushed, but somewhere in the nooks of the giant capsule sound were heard. Walking some thousand steps, this noise one arrived Walking some thousand steps towards this noise, one arrived in Mima's hall, where, frozen stiff, many space emigrants were sitting still, absorbed in sorting various forms of death or sleep. They played a game of chess with infinity. Then, one of them, who had unobtrusively gone mad, a demagogue, suddenly stood up on a ladder of words, and discoursed on the travels of mankind, on Punt and Tyre, Wineland and Dagama, but rhetoric froze to silence in his mouth, and this last speaker abruptly ceased, and stared about him shuddering in the hall, where life's journey had now gone far farther than anything ever dreamt of in the plain of Tayo. Only the echo of death came back in reply to this speech he had made for the fast dying, who now, in icy rigidity, empty-eyed, peered at the Lyra from our aniara. 100. There were no longer any lamps to light. A simple lantern burned by Mima's grave, where those still left had gathered now, turning their backs against death's oceans in helpless agony. The final ebbing hours of human time were lighted by that one flame and filled with questions. So on the earth many a prisoner has sat beside the light of his last lamp, watching its flame, and listening as the squad comes marching up to the harsh stone walls which will soon mirror the flash of firing. For space can never be more cruel than man, more than its match in human callousness. The bleak despair of prison cells on earth builds a deep vault around the souls of men, and chilly stones are heard to mutter dumbly, "Here man is master, so here is aniara." 101. This was our final night in Mima's hall. Soul after soul broke down and vanished, but before each ego finally dissolved, the soul's will made itself quite clearly felt, finding at last the strength to separate time from the grip of space, and thus to grant oblivion to the race of Doris. 102. I had coveted a paradise for this race. But since we left the one we had destroyed, the zodiac's lonely night became our only home, a gaping chasm in which no god could hear us. The eternal mystery of heaven's stars, the miracle of the celestial mechanism, is the law but not the gospel. Mercy can only thrive where there is life. We failed to grasp the true meaning of the law, and found an empty death in Mima's hall. The god on whom we fixed our final hopes lay wounded on the plains of Doris. 103. I turned the lantern low, enjoining stillness. Our tragedy has ended, but with the right of travelers down the ages, I have told our tale, a vision in galactic night. With unabated speed towards the Lyra, the Golconda droned on for 15,000 years, like a museum filled with bones and artifacts, and dried herbs and roots, relics from Doris's woods. Entombed in our immense sarcophagus, we were borne on across the desolate waves of space night, so unlike the day we'd known, unchallenged silence closing round our grave. By Mima's graveside, fallen in a circle, transformed once more to blameless dust we lay, impervious to the sting of bitter stars, lost and dispersed in oceans of nirvana.